Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome. We're back. We're back live again. Yay! So we've got the beginning of our brand new series, which I just took off the title card. There it is. It's based on a small group or personal group study, a book called the series is Flex, but this particular lesson book is called God Looks at the Heart. And it was written by Glenn Newton from Washington, I think he is. And so we've got a really exciting way of doing this time around. You'll see us at first. We'll be telling you guys kind of the main lesson and all the points and stuff. It'll be kind of like a devotional style way of doing things. And then we're going to stop talking, and we have some special guests who are going to join us tonight to discuss the contents of the lesson. So it's a little bit of a different way of doing this class. Normally, it's been kind of this one-way sort of thing where we say things, and the only way you guys communicate back to us is either through the comments or through like a Zoom call later on. This time around, we're going to have other people here with us discussing the class materials in real time. So that should be pretty cool. And of course, you can always, if you can't watch us live, or you're not, or you just aren't able to watch us entirely, you can always go back and see the recordings on our Facebook page or on YouTube. So we've got a couple of announcements here to start before we do anything else. So first things first, thank you to everybody that participated in the scavenger hunt on Saturday. That was fun. Super fun. Tanner was our winner. He won 2 tickets to the Phoenix Zoo and a $25 Visa gift card. It was really cool. He came in with 11 points out of 34 possible points, 34 possible challenges, that you could have done in the course of 2 hours, and he did 11 of those. Far and away the lead out of anybody else that participated that night. But yeah, so congratulations, Tanner, for doing that. The other things that we've got going on, we're still sort of talking within the ministry team, trying to figure out what other activities we're going to do in the next few weeks, next couple of months. We've done the scavenger hunt. We've done a drive-in movie night. Of course, we're always open to more suggestions. And so we'll try to figure out, we're trying to sort of ease everybody back together. I know there's different levels of comfort with being in person and being together. So we want to make sure that we're trying to be as sensitive as we can to all those different needs and wants there. So that's why we'll continue to be doing a lot of these sort of hybrid events where we're, like the drive-in, where like we're all together, but we're all in separate cars and all those things. So just be on the lookout for that. There's going to be lots more announcements coming up through our Facebook, our Discord, and our Instagram page for all of those little details. The other big announcement this week is that we're starting a brand new lesson series tonight, and then we're taking a week off next week. So there will not be a live class next week, and then we'll pick up the week after that. That's just how the scheduling worked. Your brother, my brother-in-law, and our new sister-in-law, Jacob and Bailey, are going to be here starting this Sunday night, and so we're going to do some family time with them next week, and it's going to be a really, really great time for us. And so we've been looking forward to it for a long time. And so we're not going to do a normal class next Wednesday night, but we will be right back the week after that with some new special guests, by then. So yeah, so let's get started, right? Yeah, let's get started. So tonight, our first lesson is called The Heart. And I'm kind of writing by the seat of my pants here. The Heart of Selflessness. There we go. If I can show that. The Heart of Selflessness. And so we have a key verse that we want you guys to sort of think about as we go through. We're going to be talking about a lot of scripture. So we don't expect you to necessarily look up each and every one, because we have a lot of them that we're going to be going through. And most of them we're just going to read to you. They won't even appear on screen. Like I said, we're kind of going by the seat of our pants this week, just due to
It's the first one.
It's the first one. It's like, think of this as like the pilot episode. Like nothing quite entirely works at pilot episodes. They just sort of get better as time goes on. So the heart of selflessness, and our key verse this evening is from 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 11. And it's important for you guys to know that for the most part, this entire series is based out of 1 Samuel. We're going to be pulling in scripture references from other parts of the Bible, but that's going to be our core our core source of Bible stories and things. It'll be from 1 Samuel. So just keep that in mind. If you have a Dead Tree Bible, just keep it open on 1 Samuel. If you have your cell phone Bible, just kind of keep it open there so that you can follow along with us. So 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 11. You want to read it?
Sure. And she made a vow saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head.
So that's 1 Samuel chapter 1. And so we know, at least from having read 1 Samuel a ton of times, because you and I did Bible Bowl for like 7 years, and we did 1 Samuel as part of Bible, like 3 or 4 times? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we know this book basically inside and out. Who's speaking here?
It's Hannah.
It's Hannah, Samuel's mother. So keep that in mind, because that's where we're going to be, and that's where this idea of the heart of selflessness is going to come from. So here's kind of our warm-up bit. And the question that I have for you guys, and feel free to comment in the comment section and let us know your answer to this if you want. Otherwise, just sort of keep it in your head, however you want to do it. And also just give us a shout out in the comments if you're watching, so that we know that you're watching. I always say that at the beginning of our lessons, but I forgot this time. So yeah, just give us a shout out in the comments if you're watching us. Have you ever made a promise to God? Because we've all heard these stories, right, of people like alcoholics that make those promises. They say, "Oh Lord, if you just let me make it through this night, I'll never drink again." Or the other person that makes some poor decision, and they say, "Oh, God, if you get me through this financial crisis, I'm going to give you 10% of everything that I own. I'll give 10% to the church. If only you'll help me make it through." Or the popular, "Oh God, if you help me get this job, I'll start going back to church." Have you heard of those? Have you ever made a promise similar to that? Have you?
I probably have, but I tried to think of an example, and I couldn't think of one.
I think for me, like I don't think I've ever like seriously meant a promise like that, like that I've like been in such dire straits that I've been trying to bargain with God to get me out of this. But I can't think of a specific example for myself. But there's been times where I've been like, "Oh, if only this, if only that."
Yeah, there's definitely the like, what if only, why can't it just be this way thoughts that go through our heads.
Right. So although each of these promises may have had good intentions when spoken, people rarely follow through on them. Like if you've heard any of these before, did you ever see that person follow up on those things? The one that says, "If you get me through this financial crisis," did you see them start being very, very generous at church? Or if you're that person, did you start giving more at church? Because the problem with these types of promises is that they focus on the part that you ask God, like what he can do for you, rather than what you can do for God. And so the book of 1 Samuel, as we read in 1 Samuel chapter 1, it begins with this woman named Hannah, and she's making a promise to God. She says, "God, if you just give me a child, I will give him back to you." And Hannah was so desperate that the priest who saw her praying thought she was drunk, because she was just so adamant about this request. She was simply pouring her heart out to God. But what was the difference between the promise that she made and the ones that we sometimes make? Mm-hmm. What is the difference? I know there's a fly in my face.
Well, Hannah obviously follows through.
She follows through. She does the thing. She does the thing that she promises. So the story of Hannah is one that we often reserve for like Mother's Day sermons. We talk about Hannah because she was this righteous mother who was going to give up her child, like the one thing that she really wanted. Mm-hmm. And, sure, That's a valid way of using that story. But it has great applications for us beyond that, beyond just women and mothers, beyond Mother's Day, beyond, any of those sort of traditional ways where we might listen to this story. And that's why we're bringing it here for 416, because, for the most part, most of us in 416 are not mothers. About half of us are not even women. So, what does this have to do with us? Well, there's a lot. There's a lot that we can learn from Hannah's decisions here and the promises that she makes. Because Hannah is this kind of epitome of selflessness, right? One of the most valuable things that you could have, your own child, she promises to give up, and then she does, right? So she wanted a child, obviously, but her reasons for wanting the child were not the typical reasons. Now, sometimes people start a family to bring them closer as a couple. Some people start families because they need to fill a sense of emptiness, because they don't feel like they're complete. Others do it out of an obligation. They get married and they say, okay, well, this is the next thing that you've got to do, because that's just the next thing you've got to do. We've heard that one, right? Those aren't necessarily bad reasons. But Hannah's reasons for having a child was so God would have another servant in his kingdom. And so that very reason is she wanted to make an impact for God. So when we are making life decisions, do we think to ourselves, which of these choices will have a greater impact on the kingdom? Do we think that? Do you think that?
I think with big life decisions, we talk about that a lot, but we still sometimes want to make sure the thing that we really want to do can bring glory to God, so we can go that way.
It's like, yes, will this thing bring glory to God? Maybe. Or maybe I can justify a way to bring glory to God with this thing that I really want to do.
Well, and I think too, I'm going to be a little contradictory here,
Go
because
for it.
I think sometimes we're given more than one option, and neither option has to be bad, as long as we find ways within that option to do God's will. If we're doing something solely just because we want to do it and we know it's going to take us away from God, then that's not good.
Right.
But if usually life decisions, it's really hard to tell what's going to be better or what's going to bring more glory to God. And I think it falls to us to figure that out as we go with whatever option we choose.
So yeah, that's good. So we're as we're talking about Hannah here, and we're thinking about the decisions that she's making, and we know that she's trying to purposefully make an impact for God's kingdom, but she's also trying to justify having this child. Like, she really wants this kid.
Yeah.
And so it's like what you were saying. It's like there are times when you have these multiple options, and your first question is not always, what is the best thing that I can do out of these things to bring glory to God? Sometimes it's also like, I really want to do this thing. How can I also bring glory to God through it? Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of what Hannah is doing here. She's able to keep her promise because she recognized some of God's attributes as well that we often forget. So in 1 Samuel chapter 2, after Samuel is born to Hannah, she worships God in prayer, remembering those things that make him a promise-keeping God. And so we're going to go over all 5 of those. It's 5, right? Did I count that right? There's these 5 traits and attributes that we sort of learn about here in 1 Samuel chapter 2. So the first one, we read in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 2.
I was not ready. I'm sorry. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God.
There is no rock like our God. So what's the attribute here?
That he is unique. He is himself.
Yeah, the uniqueness, the oneness of God. There's no other being like him. So who else can do the things that God does? Nobody. Of course not. Doctors can't cure cancer just by making it so. I mean, there's certain cancers that can be cured, but it's very difficult. But God can just make it happen. Psychiatrists can't completely remove emotional trauma. Of course not. It's a long process, and it's very hard work. but God can just take care of it. Humans can't forgive sin, but God can. Scientists can't create life out of nothing, but God can. In Job chapter 23, verse 13, Job says that God stands alone and who can oppose him? He does whatever he pleases. And God's very nature has always been unique in that he has the power and desire to help his children. So your doctor, counselor, preacher may not know what you need, but God not only does know, he also cares. And so that's a very special part of God. The next attribute we read about in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 3.
Do not keep talking so proudly or let your mouth speak such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. So
this next attribute is wisdom. In Greek mythology, we have the goddess of the dawn. Her name is Aurora. That's why, we have things like the Aurora Borealis. And, Princess Aurora from Sleeping Beauty is named after this goddess. The goddess of the dawn. She fell in love with Tithonus. Sure. I think I'm saying that right. Tithonus, a mortal youth. So she's a goddess. He's just a normal guy. Zeus, the king of the gods, gave her the privilege of choosing a gift for her mortal lover. Aurora asked that Tithonus live forever. But she forgot to ask that Tithonus remain forever young, which is a really important thing to remember when you're asking for a wish like that. But she forgot to do that. So consequently, Tithonus grew progressively older, but he could never die. So that means his body continued to deteriorate. He became ill. He became all those things, but he could never die. And so he was always living in this perpetual suffering of old age. The gift then became a curse. So the God of the Bible is not like the mythological gods. He never forgets anything that is not considered before. He answers our prayers. He does not grant us a request which ultimately will become a burden. That's not how God operates. Therefore, we must accept his answers as the best for us. So in Psalms, the Psalm number 139, verses 1 through 3, it says, you have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all of my ways, because God has infinite wisdom. So this next attribute we read about in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 6.
He raises the poor. Sorry, my voice is bad. We do it.
Oh, no worries. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes and has them inherit a throne of honor. For the foundations of the earth are the Lord's. On them he has set the world. So what attribute is that?
That's power.
Power. So a Bible class teacher was examining her pupils after a series of lessons on God's omnipotence. She asked, is there anything God cannot do? And there was silence. Finally, one kid held up his hand. So disappointed, the teacher asks him, well, just what is it that God cannot do? Well, replies the boy, he can't please everybody. And that's true. But he longs to answer our prayers, and he has the power to do whatever we ask within his will. Of this truth, Jesus says in Matthew chapter 7, verse 11, if you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? Because he has the power to just do it. Right? Mm-hmm. The next one we read about in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 8.
He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes. Is that where we're at? With princes? Is that where we're at? Or did you go too far?
I think I accidentally copied the same verse again.
Oh, okay.
Whoops. So 1 Samuel chapter 2.
Yeah. Figure it out.
Oh, I can. It's in here. Oh my goodness. 1 Samuel chapter 2. Oh, the power one was wrong. I'm sorry. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 6 was the Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and brings up. That's power.
Okay.
Then the ash heap one was the benevolence one that we were going to talk about next.
Okay.
By the seat of our pants, people. That's how it goes.
Okay, keep going.
We often look at God as though he's sort of a reluctant Santa Claus. What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah,
that it's just a chore to like figure out how to give you what you want.
Yeah, like it's
that he doesn't actually want to give you what you want.
Yeah, or it's like we have to keep ourselves on like the nice list instead of the naughty list, and like then that's all that it takes. So as long as we don't make the naughty list, then God will continue to grant what we ask for, right? But just like Santa, he probably won't give us exactly what we ask for, but that's not true, right? God wants to give us good gifts. When you and I go Christmas shopping for like our friends and our family, we don't think to ourselves, "Oh, now what can we get our friends that's just something they hate?"
Or that's close to what they want, but it's not what they asked for.
It's like, let's be extra cheap and bad.
Yeah.
No, we don't gotta do that. Of course not. We go to a lot of painstaking effort to try to find things that they're going to love, whether that's something we buy or something we make or just experiences that we do with them. We don't always succeed, obviously. We've had some stinkers where we've given someone something that is just not the thing they wanted at all, but we try. And so considering the words of Jesus, if we try that hard to give our children, our friends, our family good gifts, then how much harder does God try? Right? And furthermore, why do we give our family, our friends good gifts? Why do we do that? Well, because we love them, right? In Psalms again, Psalm 63 verse 3, it says, "Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you." Hannah realized why God gave her the gift of Samuel, because he loved her. And so finally, the final attribute that we're going to touch on here tonight comes out of 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 9. And it says, "He will guard the feet of his faithful servants, but the wicked will be silenced in the place of darkness. It is not by strength that one prevails." So we all love the passage from Romans that says, "Nothing will separate us from the love of God." But honestly, I'm not sure we really know what to do with that. When we begin talking about security, for many of us, we sort of drift to this discussion of like, we're saved. So once saved, always saved, right? Security means simply that God takes care of those who love him. So security is Job sitting in the dust, covered in sores, saying, "Though he slay me, yet I will hope in him." Job chapter 13, verse 15. Security is Daniel surrounded by hungry lions, sleeping like a baby. Security is David straining his neck, telling Goliath that he's going to win, that he will chop his head off. Security is Paul and Silas sitting in prison, singing praises that shook the foundations. Hannah rejoices when her prayer was answered because she knew that God was a God who takes care of his children. Okay, so all of that being said, we've gone through the example that Hannah sort of sets for us way back in 1 Samuel, in that she makes this promise to God and then keeps it.
Yeah.
Right? She's given this boy who becomes Samuel the prophet, and she chooses to return him to God and to God's service. We've learned and covered some of the attributes of God. Again, those are uniqueness, wisdom, power, benevolence, and security. Numbers chapter 23 verse 19 says, "God is not human that he should lie, not a human being that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill?" See, God is a keeper of his promises. Yet God keeps his promises in hopes that we will keep ours. Hannah asked God for a child and also made a promise to him. How did her story end? 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 28 and 29 tell us that she says, "So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord." And he worshiped the Lord there at the temple. So what promises have you made to God? How will your story end? Are you keeping your promises? And so let's talk about this a little bit more with our friends. So tonight, I'm really excited to say that we've got Paul and Jaden joining us, and we've got Josh and Diamond.
Yay!
Dubois also joining us. You guys need to unmute yourselves because
Working on it.
Hello.
There you go.
Hi.
all right. Who wants to start?
Can I start?
Go
I
for
have
it.
so many
You
thoughts.
have thought.
Probably it doesn't necessarily agree with the lesson's thoughts. So I'm going to kind of argue the point that Hannah is selfless in her petition to God for giving her a child and then giving him back. Because from what I understand of Hannah, she is coming to God as this broken woman. She says her spirit is in turmoil because she is not being treated well because she lacks having children. In her culture, not having children is a failure. She has failed as a wife, as a woman, and she is exposed to a lot of criticism for it. So I think it's important to realize that while she does barter with God and she makes a promise to give her son back to him, and she does keep that promise, she is not coming to God just saying, hey, I want to find a way to honor you more, so give me a kid so I can do that. She's coming to him because she can't even function within her family with a husband who loves her because her spirit is so torn apart by this. She can't serve God the way that she wants to, so she's doing something about it. She's going to God because she knows and trusts that he can do something about it, and then she follows through. But anyway, I really had to say it.
I think
I guess
it's interesting because I don't think you're wrong. I was thinking about it. I was like, well, like I was just telling Paul, I was like, but why did she want a child? Like I was like, but for that point, it's like, why did she want a child? Was it because she just desperately wanted one, or was it because like she actually wanted to create another servant for the Lord? So I'm really glad you cleared that up for me because I didn't read that part. But the fact that she stayed true to her word, it would have been so easy to be like, thanks God, I have my kid now, like I'm done. I love him too much. I'm not going to give him back, you know? And so the fact that she was so steadfast in that way, and that's where I think the selflessness comes in. And she's like, okay, like you gave me a kid, I'm going to keep my end of the bargain. Like, I feel like that's where the selflessness comes in, and like her faith and her belief and trust in God.
Yeah. I'm just saying she definitely received something in return.
Oh, for sure. Well,
sure.
and there's something that she retains even after she gives the child up.
Yeah.
The part that stuck out to me is you bringing up the turmoil, like especially in that culture kind of thing. It kind of reminded me of like I was looking at some of the discussion questions, and the first one being like, have you ever made a promise to God and failed to keep it? And just like a big plight for me for a long time, I've talked to a lot of people about it, was like relationship stuff kind of thing. And like way back in the day, I was definitely in that bargaining stage of like, oh God, like once I have a good woman, then I'll get myself together and it'll all be good kind of thing, you know? But like, you know, after a long while, like I really did understand, no, I need to get myself together first and like really serve God, the things I care about most, and stand up for that in order to, you know, get the attention of a good woman. And, you know, also like understand how to maintain a healthy relationship as well. So like going back to the turmoil of just like, you know, we all have our own versions of things that have been really difficult for us. And I think living through so much of that difficulty also fuels conviction. And I think that's also part of like what happened with Hannah, is going through this long time without a child. And like, I think that's kind of like a big thing of like when it finally came, is like, no, I want this child to serve God, because his life is literally a gift from God kind of thing, like really having a deeper understanding of that power and that gift kind of thing. So that's kind of how I looked at that.
Yeah.
So a couple of things that really stood out to me in Hannah's situation, going back to what you said, Janelle, about her just being in turmoil, she's in grief, and she's even exhibiting like a grieving by bargaining, right? So she's bargaining with God. If you do this, then I'll do that. I think her intention was always to give her son back to the Lord. And I look at her selflessness in the way that she worshiped, because it tells us that year after year, when they went to the annual sacrifice, to perform their annual sacrifice, that she went. She traveled with Eli, with Peninnah, and it says that she was like tormented, like verbally abused by Elkanah's other wife. And so she was like tortured, basically, going to worship every single year. And she still dedicated herself to worshiping God. And that right there is an act of selflessness, right? So here she is antagonized and provoked for years, and she's begging God for a child. And what's God's answer been before he granted her wish? It was no. And that didn't stop her from worshiping. And then when she's making her sacrifice, she's talking to Eli, talking to God, and she calls herself servant, I think 4 times in that passage. And that word servant in the Hebrew, it means like a handmaid or a female bondservant, slave. So she had already humbled herself in correct position with God. And I think she just wanted to give back to God what he gave to her. But I think that was her intent from the beginning, because we see her faithfulness and her trust in God, even though he was telling her no for I don't know how many years. And I believe she was chronically depressed. I mean, she wouldn't eat, right? Her husband tried to console her. He would give her double portions. And she was just completely in grief because of the situation. So I think just selflessness is just a part of her normal character makeup. And it was just only natural for her to give him back.
Yeah. And I do wonder how long, because it talks about this being a long-term thing for her. I wonder how long it took for her to kind of get to that point of, oh, now I want this child. Like, obviously I need this child for my own reasons, for my own well-being, but I also now want this child so I can give back to God, because now I am at that place of humility where I need to show him how much I'm willing to give him. If I were in Hannah's shoes and I had been waiting that long, I'm sure I would have started out by like, well, I am the wife that is loved. Of course, God is going to, like, I serve God. I do make all these sacrifices. Of course, he's going to bless me with children. And then when he doesn't, like, and I start, if I had started getting assaulted by this other wife and who was like, yeah, well, at least I have kids, I then would have been like, see what she's doing, God? Like, of course you're going to give me the tools I need to overcome this and show her. I think it's a natural thing to go through this process of still having very selfish ambition, because we feel justified in being the victim, or just having something that is that unfortunate happen to us. And I really do admire that she comes to the point, at least the point where we see her, where she can say, no, this is what I want. This is how I'm going to handle it. I'm still going to do what I can to make sure that I'm a servant and that my life is a sacrifice to God. And I'm not saying that that's what happened. Obviously, it's speculation, but I think it's interesting to think about, because we often, as humans, go through that cycle, and God has to bring us to that place where we can let go and look to how it can serve God.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the beautiful part of the story is Hannah learning or having the ability to love the Creator above the creation, and learning that that her blessing is not more important than her blesser. And she knows that with God, everything is going to be okay. And I feel like that's the whole definition of selfishness, is realizing that God gives to us so that we can give. We're ultimately appreciating him for being our creator through our giving up of what he gives to us.
Mhm.
Sorry, I still have this fly over like my face, and it just
Get it
will not
done.
leave me alone. Those are really, really good points, you guys. You know, something that kind of sticks out to me, and something that I kind of have a problem with this particular lesson is this idea that like Hannah's story just suddenly ends when she gives up the kid. No, it doesn't, because we know it doesn't, because there's more to 1 Samuel that takes painstaking effort to document Hannah's life after she gives up Samuel to the temple. You know, like Josh said, she shows up every sacrifice. She continues to bring him like clothes and all these other things. She, even though he's not living with her, she still gets to be mom.
Mhm.
She still gets to be mom, and it's to me, it's like there's an additional layer of gift giving here, because God could have very easily said, well, sure, I will accept Samuel back as my servant, and that's it, you're done. But instead, God allows this opening where, yes, like Samuel is serving the temple, he's serving God, he's living away from his family, but mom can still come see him, and mom can still give him gifts, mom can still take care of him, even from afar. And so like her story doesn't end, and she continues to be validated by the standards of the culture then, and even by the standards of our culture now. This is a mother that continues to be a mother in a very unique circumstance.
I think it's a testament. It's like a renewal of her promise to God too, that she would bring him things and remind her, I guess, and him maybe, of this promise that she made. Like, why, this is why you're here. This is why I'm here.
It's almost as if she's continually giving him up each time that she goes to visit him, as this reminder that this is not just a one-time like offering to God. Like, no, I mean that it's a permanent gift of return.
And I think that speaks to the power of the promises or commitments we make to God, is that it's all nice and well when it's good intentioned, but how often do we follow through for a little while and then it's like, well, that one lasted pretty long. I think we did it. But no, like God is forever, and you have your life, and if you've promised something that does take that amount of time, you really have to think about how you're fulfilling it, or if you can't, you need to be talking to God about that too, I guess. It's just very interesting.
Because the first step is really understanding the magnitude of dedication to things and stuff like that.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a bit about those attributes of God that we talked about here out of chapter 2. Obviously, like in most people's Bibles, there's not going to be like section headers in 1 Samuel chapter 2 that says, oh, these are the attributes of God. But yeah, we can kind of pick up these 5 different things here from the way God is described in this chapter. And so I wanted to hear thoughts on that, if anybody had any.
Are you talking about like which ones, like the question is which ones would we prefer to like have a better understanding of? Is that?
Well, I mean, we can talk about that, but if you have any general thoughts about this idea of finding these attributes of God out of this chapter. But yeah, if you want to answer that, go for it.
Oh, well, the one that stands out to me is security. And it's more the fact that like, it talks about wisdom and uniqueness, and like, in uniqueness, God is the only God. In wisdom, God is smart. He knows what he's doing. And like, those are things that I feel like I have a pretty firm grasp on, but I feel like it's taken a long time for me. And like, I feel like just recently I've started to actually learn more about security, like what it actually means to be secure in my faith, to really trust God and to feel secure in those areas. So that's the one that stands out to me the most, because it's one of those things like, I know God is all powerful, I know all these things, but like really diving into like what security in my faith and like in God has been really impactful, especially in the past, I don't know, couple months, I suppose. It's just I've actually learned how to like understand it and be like, oh, this is what that is. And so that's been really nice.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like this sort of pandemic time has been a really good example and crash course on this idea of relying on God for security.
Exactly. Exactly.
If you didn't understand God's attribute of security before like March, you certainly have a better understanding now than you did back then. Like, you know, it's to the point where like it's completely rewritten the way we even approach like these classes and the way we even approach teaching, like say in 416 and this young adult group. We had sort of a certain way where we kind of understood that was the way that, you know, you can reach these, you know, 18 to 25-year-olds and they can understand things, but now it's like a different ballgame entirely. And that's part of that reliance on God for security that kind of comes in where, you know, everything is weird and crazy and strange and scary and sad, but God is still there, and his lessons, his word, all of it still applies. It just sounds a little different now. It just hits a little harder in different ways.
And even during these times, we can find good things.
Yeah.
It's like, I think that goes back to a lot of the examples you gave before, like whether they were in jail or next to lions or something like that, they found a way to relax and praise and stuff like that. And I mean, I totally agree with Jaden. I think that's the one that stands out to me the most is the security, because I think for a lot of us, that's one of the biggest tests is when trouble's in our face.
Yeah.
What do we do? How do we react? Kind of thing. But like if it's something we can really get a hold of, even like mentally and emotionally, even if all the answers aren't right in front of us at that moment, it's going to be a huge benefit to us, as well as making us better servants as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, it also, to me, it's like it challenges my definition of security, as sometimes I think of it as comfort, you know, but comfort and security are not the same thing. And it just reminds me of that the kids song I used to sing, he's got the whole world in his hands. It's like no matter what, he still has us in his hands. You look at Job, like you said, he still had Job in his hands, but I mean Job was really going through it, but he wasn't gonna allow the devil to do, you know, so much to him. He was still securely in God's hands. And I think that is what I've been learning, is that security doesn't necessarily mean comfort. So there's
I'm with you on that one, Simon. I am totally with you on that one.
So regarding God's character or attributes, I thought I understood God's wisdom, but I don't. And I say that because his wisdom is so divine that he knows exactly what we would do in any given situation, even if we're not put in that situation. So he has this middle knowledge. And I mean, how can you, I can't think of how I would operate in relationship with someone if I knew what they would do in any given situation. And then the fact that to be so wise to allow pain and suffering, and to know that it's necessary for our obedience, for our sanctification, for our humility, for us to trust him, for us to respond to the gospel. I mean, that to me, that's taking a risk, right? So allowing someone to be essentially tortured, or to go through adversity and opposition, and knowing how that can produce, you know, patience, long suffering, and all these other desirable qualities like courage, is just, man couldn't come up with that type of wisdom. You know, it has to be divine. So I don't know. His wisdom is really perplexing for me sometimes.
That I feel that, like, I think of God's wisdom when like you know, I think he, like, I mean, it's even like written with stories in the Bible. He just throws so much purpose in so many things, and like, you know, I don't think any of us could ever completely understand, but I feel like there are these moments where like we hit something really good in our life, and then we look back on like maybe 3 or 4 years, and so many like random things all over the place start just like clicking into place. I'm like, oh my gosh, so many of these things did have some sort of purpose to it. Kind of.
For me, at least reading this lesson, the benevolence of God here is just, I don't know. It's really interesting to me because on Hannah's part, she wasn't afraid. Like she obviously knows God. Her prayers and her praise show that she does understand the characteristics of God that we're talking about. And she's kept them close to her heart as her hope. And I think a lot of times it's hard for me to go to God when I'm in the middle of an emotion of something. Like when it starts out and I'm a little frustrated, I'm like, okay, God, like help me get through this. I know it'll be okay, but just guide me. As I'm going through that part of like, I don't know, I just want to be angry about this. I do want to question God, but I'm not going to talk to him about it until I can be back to praising him the way I know I should be. It's really hard for me to remember that he does, like, that's the place where he can help me the most, where he probably wants to hear from me the most, because it's okay to be honest with God. It's okay that Hannah decided to kind of bargain or barter or like argue some points with God.
And she was still in distress.
And she was still stressed, but she didn't blame him. And I think that's the important thing. She's like, this is the way it's been. I understand that. But please, like, don't forget me. Look at my suffering. Give me some relief because I can't keep going like this. And, you know, that is humility and that is putting trust. But it's also, there is some challenge in there for God that's like, do you remember me? Like, can you please help me? Because I know you're able to do it. So, you know, give me something to work with. And I think it's hard for us to remember that doing that is okay sometimes, as long as you stay humble and knowing like this is respectful, like this is where God has put me for now. And I can revisit this over and over while I'm going through the struggle. And at the end, as long as I've remained respectful and I give God praise for the final answer, or when I know it's changed, or if I just know it's not going to change, as long as I can get to that point, it's okay to kind of go through those fluctuating emotions, I guess, in the presence of God, not kind of feeling like we're hiding it away. And then it's like stepping up to the microphone. Okay, God, I'm ready to talk about this now, because he already knows.
Yes.
And I think he valued Hannah's honesty in those situations. So that's kind of what I'm reminding myself of tonight, looking at this.
It's really interesting because I think we're opposite. Like, if a problem starts, like, I'm like, okay, I can handle this. Like, I can figure this out. It's going to be fine. And it's like when I'm like in the middle or towards the end and I'm just like out of my mind and I don't even know what to do. And that's when I remember, oh yeah, God, hey. But then I'm like, then I feel so guilty because then I'm like, I don't want the time, like the only times, because, you know, sometimes we get busy and I don't know about you guys, but honestly, like my prayer life could be a lot better. I'm not always the best at remembering of like saying prayers. It's gotten a lot better, but of like saying prayers and just saying thank you. And so when I'm in those moments of like distress and like, what am I going to do? And I immediately go, hey, God. I'm like, no, I feel like I shouldn't do that. Like, I know that he's like, okay, good. You remember me. But in my head, I'm like, I haven't been like praising him like I should. I haven't been like grateful enough. I've taken things for granted. And I don't feel like I can go ask him for more at that point. And so I feel like I'm completely opposite of being like, no, I got this. And then being like, oh, I'm stuck and I need help.
I think that's the amazing thing about God here is that he accepts Hannah at her most broken, where she is in the position where she is least able to serve the way we would think of serving. and he still grants her petition, and he still blesses her, and he still shows that he loves her. It's not just when she's like, all right, I've soldiered up and I've taken it and I've done my best. No, she comes to him and she's like, I can't do it anymore. Like, help me. I don't know what else to do. And here's like the only solution I have. Does this work for you, God? And he's like, okay, I love you. Let's do it this way. And it, I think that kind of proves the selflessness of God here too.
Yes. So we have a couple minutes left. Any other sort of final thoughts about our class tonight, about Hannah, about the attributes of God? Anything else that anybody wants to sort of say?
I'll say a quick thing.
Sure.
So going back to her distress, I think she challenges our current dominant thought of worship culture. Here she is being extremely vulnerable in worship, not caring who's around. She's pouring her heart out. She's not trying to look poised and put together. She's crumbling, and she's not afraid to show God that and show others. She's that vulnerable. And the fact that God responds to her emotionally is what brings me comfort, because we often think that God is a being, right? Which he's a being, but he's a person. We forget the personhood or the personification of God, where he is passable. He relates to us on an emotional level, where he's involved with us, and he cares about how we feel, and he responds to our feelings, not just our faith or our request or our petition or our worship, but he responds to our emotions with his emotions. And that type of relationship with a transcendent being, it helps me to maintain, faithfulness and trust in him, knowing that he relates to me not only on a theological level or academic level, but an emotional level. What makes me human. He feels that, and he responds to it. And I would just wonder what our worship would be like. And this is for me too, if I was more vulnerable in that space in my worship to God, whether it be private or in public, being able to just be authentically me and to be as vulnerable as Hannah was. And the fact that she continued in worship in spite of being told no, in spite of her distress, she continued, she persevered. So it shows her devotion, and which was not conditioned on God's blessings or promises, for that matter, because he had been telling her no. And that kind of challenges the current mindset in today's Christian thinking when it comes to following God and obeying his word. We're looking for blessings, and she knew that she had the greatest blessing was the relationship factor. It wasn't about him granting her wishes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to that point, the only thing I would add is that, when we became Christians, we made a commitment and a promise to God as well, that we would be true and faithful and honest with our worship, with our actions, with our thoughts. And so, for us to see Hannah in that light of a truthful worship, and know that there are days where we go into worship where we are not truthfully worshiping.
Well, I think too, it's important to remember on Eli's part, he sees her and he accuses her of being a drunk.
Yep.
And she tells him, no, like, this is like, that would be horrifying if I'm worshiping and someone's
it's so rude.
Like,
are you high? Are you high right now?
Right. And it's like, no, this is, I also wrote down, like, her transparency is inspiring, that she was able to look at him, this, I am pouring out my heart because I'm in distress. But she went away happy because this other person that God put there, she was transparent. He got over whatever he was thinking. He was like, I see, like, I was wrong. And then he says, may God grant your request. She goes away happy, knowing God has provided a sign through another brother, like another person, at least encouragement. But she went away pretty confident that like this time was going to be different. But it took that interaction, it took the honesty, and then it took that other person to recognize, oh, I'm wrong. Like, you're right. You should be able to do that. And I hope this is what happens. Or I hope that, you know, I can be a part of your worship. I think that's a really important thing for anyone on the other side of seeing someone worshiping the way that we're supposed to react.
Yeah, absolutely. That vulnerability with God is absolutely so important. But, you know, like you said, like I think that vulnerability with each other for our relationships in the church is absolutely important as well, with our brother and sisters we've known for a while, and like especially for new people coming in. You know, it's like definitely a lot of people do get a not great first impression where everyone is just like, you know, acting perfect kind of thing, or just like mistakes aren't allowed here kind of impression, which is absolutely not the case, you know.
Right.
All right, so we are running out of time, so I'm just gonna have to cut it there. Thank you guys so much for being on the stream with us.
Thank you, Gabby.
Thanks, Gabby. Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you.
I know this is for those of you guys still watching, which I don't know how many there are. I know this is kind of a longer one than normal, but again, remember, we're transitioning back into some sort of version of normal, and we normally have hour-long class, so here we are. Again, thanks to Jaden and Paul from Josh and Diamond. Thank you guys so much. I'm gonna hide you guys, but stick around, don't go away. And so, yeah, thanks to those guys for being there with us tonight. Thanks to you for watching. And so, like I said at the beginning of class, remember that next week there will not be a live class. There'll be something else. But then the week after that, we'll be right back here with our next lesson in our God Looks at the Heart series and our next session of Bible Book Club, which I forgot to put the thing up.
That's okay.
That's okay. I'll remember next time. And our next session of Bible Book Club with our new guests. I don't know who they are yet, but we're gonna know pretty soon. But yes, thank you guys for watching. We love you guys. Stay safe out there, and have a wonderful night.